Good morning. I hope you and your family are doing well. I hope that as a consequence of all this that's going on, you're growing closer to the Lord and your relationship with Him. This morning, for our topic, I wanted to get back to evangelism. That was originally going to be our theme for this year, was this go into all the world and make disciples. And with all this lockdown and the government telling us not to go, it's kind of difficult to do that part of it. But I wanted to get to talking back to evangelism because there's really just a lot of things that I wanted to talk about this year for this theme. And so I want to go back to where I was about 2 months ago when I did a sermon about Matthew chapter 4. And we kind of gleaned from that some disciple-making tips and some general rules of thumb about what it means to make disciples. But I want to go back there and I want to pick up where we left off in Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. And we started that sermon saying that, the reason that Matthew chapter 4 is a picture of making disciples is because in Matthew chapter 5, it starts out by saying there are disciples. And so let's read that. Matthew chapter 5, 1 and 2 says, "Seeing the crowds, he," being Jesus, "went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying." Now, this Sermon on the Mount, this sitting thing, this is a common thing for rabbis in this time to sit when they taught. But we see Jesus sitting down to teach them. And this sermon that follows in this chapter and the ones after is really about answering two really important questions. Two things that if you read the Gospel of Matthew, kingdom is a big thing. So one of the questions it seeks to answer is, what is this kingdom all about? When Jesus is talking about the kingdom is here, the kingdom is at hand, what does that mean? What does that look like? And then the second thing is specifically, what does it mean for me or for anyone that's listening? What does that mean for us to be a part of this kingdom? Or in our case, and when we're talking about discipleship, what does that mean to be a disciple of Jesus? What does it mean to follow Him? And this sermon is going to lay out and teach for us what it means to be a disciple. Now, I know I told you I wanted to get back to evangelism. If you think back to the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28, and I'll read it here if you don't remember it, but it said, Matthew chapter 28, starting in verse 19, "Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you." Now, it may seem that I'm going to work backwards here because I'm going to start with this teaching. But the reason for it is I want us to have a clear picture of what a disciple is, what that looks like. Because I think by having a good idea of, we have the world and we see what disciples are supposed to look like, then we can start to piece together the process of how that comes about. And I think even when we look at these standards, what we realize is that depending on where we are in our walk, there's a lot of these that we look at and say, man, I need to step up my game as a disciple. I need to be a better disciple of Jesus, a better citizen of the kingdom. So I want to start there, and I think it's a good thing for us to talk about as we're separated and we're not back yet. And so that's what I want to do. I want to go through this Sermon on the Mount and talk about what it means to be a disciple, what that looks like. And I think this will be beneficial for us in this isolation to remind ourselves the roots of, what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to follow Christ? And these are things that we can put into practice as we're apart and as we're trying to kind of wrestle with some stuff on our own. So it may feel like we're working backwards, but I think it's good to have this as a foundation as we move into our talks more specifically about evangelism. So this morning we are going to start in Matthew chapter 5. We're going to start with verses 3 through 10. And if you look in your Bible or if you've read these before, these are commonly referred to as the Beatitudes. Now, the reason they're called the Beatitudes is basically these are traits and things to look up to. And I think you'll see this when we start talking about the word blessed or blessed. If you look, each one of these Beatitudes start with that word. And if you kind of let you know a little bit about the interpretation process is, there's a lot of times where words don't match up one to one. When we talk about like a chicken, a chicken is probably a chicken. Well, maybe there's different types of chicken. And some chickens, if you say it in a certain language, they're going to have different type of chickens. They all just refer to as chicken. Whereas, maybe in other languages, it's a little different breakdown, right? That's pretty simple one-to-one comparison. But sometimes words that convey multiple meanings can be difficult. And you kind of, as an interpreter, as a person translating the Bible, they have to decide, well, which one of these words is best? And if you look across most translations, you're actually going to see not a lot of variety in this. Most times it's going to be blessed or blessed. And I think that's good, and I think that's fine, but I want to communicate to you as we go through these, there's a little more going on than just this idea of blessed. And so what I want to do, and I want to give you a couple of words that are options and things that kind of piece together this fuller meaning of what exactly it's trying to communicate here, as opposed to just this one word. So the reason that blessed by God, by God in parentheses, the reason that was ended up chosen is because it really conveys the most of the meaning that it can. There's one slight thing that happens with this that kind of makes you want to pick another word, but really none of them are good. But essentially this makes more explicit something that was really only implicit. When this word for blessed, there's actually another word in the Greek language for blessed by God, but that is not the one that's used here. It is part of this meaning, but really, like I say, it takes something that was implicit and makes it more explicit. When we hear blessed, we think, okay, that's coming from God. Well, really, that's there in the original Greek, but it's more implicit. It's not directly saying that God is the one that makes this blessing, but when you read through these, it's obvious that that's where it's coming from. But there's another idea here that should be kind of conveyed. Think about the word happy. Okay, the word happy, and you may have even heard a couple of preachers that use this word for these Beatitudes. Happy is really trying to say it's a congratulatory, it's a commending of a certain situation, right? These things that follow, it's saying, yes, these people, these should be commended, these should be congratulated. And that's part of this too. It's not just that, this kind of, A plus B equals C. It's not that if you are this, God's going to bless you. That is part of it. But what this is saying is that these situations, these people, these are people to be commended. These are people to be congratulated. These are situations that are, uplifted in some way. Now, happy doesn't quite convey it because there's a certain psychological component to happy. We think of happy, as very fleeting and like I say, there's these psychological things that go into that. And so that word is really, for that reason, a lot weaker than the word blessed. Well, there's another idea here. Think of the word fortunate. Right? That's a really good way of saying it. Because what Jesus is trying to say here, this is part of this Greek word, is that you are fortunate when you find yourself in these situations. You are fortunate when you are a peacemaker. You're fortunate when you mourn, which is a really weird thing, but we'll get to later. But that's part of it. But the reason we don't use fortunate is because fortunate implies luck. It kind of adds this dimension to it that really is not as good. And then the last one is, think of it in terms of congratulations to, right? And we kind of talked about that with the word happy. But see, this is supposed to be all wrapped up into this Greek word that we translate into blessed. And with all these, they have issues why we don't use these other words. But I want you to see that this word blessed is not just if you are this, God will bless you. It's more than that. Jesus is trying to say that these are the things that we uphold. These are the people that we look at and say, these people are the model, the fortunate ones. These are the ones that are truly happy. These are the ones that are lifted up in God's kingdom, in God's discipleship, right? These are the things that we should uphold. And I think that the title of Beatitudes tries to convey that, is these are some of the values and the things that are upheld within God's kingdom. So I wanted to give you that. The other thing I want you to see before we get into it is, when do these things take place? We talked about the word blessed, right? We know that God is going to bless these different things that we read about. If you're in this situation, in fact, it even gives a specific, thing that's going to happen. If you mourn, you'll be comforted, right? We get this kind of breakdown. But then the question is, when will these happen? And I want us to think back, even further, if you've heard my sermon on the kingdom, but there's this concept of now, but not quite yet. And I think you'll see that when you look at the first and the last beatitude, verse 3 and then verse 10, they both end with, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So, we talked about that when we talked about the kingdom of heaven. This is a now thing. It's not just a totally later thing. There's some aspect of this kingdom that is going on now. There's some aspect of this blessedness that's going on now. But if you look at the rest of the ones in between, 4 through 9, it says, they shall be. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And there's an aspect of this that the fullness of that blessing is really to look forward to. There's part of it that's going on now. There's part of it that we see in our time right now. But then there's part of it that can only be fully recognized when God brings the kingdom to completion. And that's, I'm tying together a lot of things from Matthew. But that's an aspect of these, is when you think about, some of these are going to sound really weird to think, well, it's going on right now, and some of it's going on later, and you're going to wrestle with that. But I want you to remember, this key aspect of the kingdom is it's both now, and then there's also a part that's not yet. There's a part that we still have to look forward to. So we're going to go through these Beatitudes, and as we do, there's 3 things I want to do with each one. For the sake of time, I just want to hit these as we go through. The first thing I want to do is explain some of the meanings of the phrases. I think a lot of times these phrases, there's a lot there to unpack, but I want to just try to narrow down to specific stuff to make sure that you at least see one aspect of it with each one that we do. The second thing I want to do is I want to make a connection to the Old Testament. One thing that I think a lot of times within the church and in a lot of churches, we don't realize how much the New Testament builds on what was already set up in the Old Testament. We don't realize all these connections that are going on. And in fact, a lot of these, you're going to see they're almost word for word from things that we get from the Old Testament. And I want to do that by showing you, with each one, I'm going to give you an Old Testament verse. And if you want to do this in your own time, I strongly recommend it. Just write these down and maybe write them in your Bible next to each one and go back and look at these. And I want you to see these connections, because a lot of times when we read the Old Testament and we read the New Testament, we feel a certain disconnect. We feel like they don't necessarily match up. But I think the God of the Old Testament is the same God of the New Testament. And I believe that a lot of what really was trying to be taught in the Old Testament is the same stuff that we see when Jesus comes on the scene. Really, it's just the Old Testament gives us a lot more stories of people and their flaws and their mistakes in trying to follow God and His ways. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to compare each one to our culture that we deal with around us. And I think that's the big thing I want you to think about as we do these. These were not meant to be like, oh yeah, keep doing this good thing that you're doing. In fact, a lot of these are meant to be the exact opposite of what the Jewish people at this time and the culture around them were really doing. And they were supposed to be things that were in certain ways shocking to what was going on in that time and day. And I think it's even applies to today. So let's start to go through these. The first one in verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, poor in spirit, well, before I get there, I want to say it's no coincidence that this one is first. When we talk about this idea of poor in spirit, it's this idea of being disadvantaged and powerless. When the Bible talks about the poor, this is what it is. It's those that are in a disadvantaged situation and powerless to really bring themselves out of that. Now, in American culture, we tend to think that people can pull themselves back up by the bootstraps. This was not always the case for people throughout all of time. And in fact, a lot of times when you were in poverty, you were locked into poverty. There was really nothing you could do about that. So when the Bible talks about poor, it's really these people that are disadvantaged and powerless. Now, in spirit means that those that realize this disadvantage and this powerlessness to do anything about their spiritual state. When you think about our situation as Christians, this is one of the big foundations you should build your faith on, is understanding that we cannot do it. There's no amount of my ability to live the right way that gets me to heaven. There's nothing I can do on my own. I have to fully rely on the sacrifice of Christ and then follow in faith. And that's where this all starts. It's no coincidence that this is first. A chapter earlier in Matthew 4:17, Jesus said, or Matthew says about Jesus, from that time Jesus began to preach, saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And then here we have chapter 5, verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It says, look, if you can admit your spiritual bankruptcy, if you can admit your spiritual state, that you are disadvantaged and that you are powerless, that you cannot do it on your own, You are blessed. Fortunate are you, happy are you, because yours is the kingdom of heaven. This is the entrance point. Repentance, realizing that my way of doing things is not right. I need to change my ways to start to live this faith, to start to live in faith following God. This starts off our Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. For your Old Testament connection, Isaiah 61 verses 1 through 2. You'll see this very thing there. But then finally, I want you to consider what our culture says about this. Think about, in our culture, what kind of thing is upheld as fortunate, as happy, as blessed? Well, it's self-reliance. It's being able to do everything on your own. It's not needing other people's help. Look at that person. They pulled themselves out of this terrible situation all on their own. They didn't need government help. They didn't need this. They didn't need that. And the list goes on. Self-reliance is this thing that culture upholds as the fortunate ones, as those that we should look up to and try to emulate. But yet Jesus starts off his list by saying, hey, the fortunate ones in the kingdom are those that can realize they need God, that they cannot do it on their own, that they need help, that they are disadvantaged, that they are powerless, because that is where the kingdom starts. It starts from us realizing our state and being able to admit that, being able to admit our faults, being able to admit our past mistakes, being willing to change our way of doing things because we understand our way is not going to get us there. Right? You can start to see these are supposed to be things that kind of challenge the culture around us. Look at verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Now, this mourn is not just a personal bereavement. If you look throughout the uses of, and in fact, in some of the uses that I'm going to give you for your Old Testament connection, this is not just a mourn of, well, I lost a family member. You know, there's a lot of different things that we can mourn in this life. And I think, my kind of talk about the laments lately have been us mourning the loss of everything that we were used to. The ability for me to preach this sermon in front of a crowd of almost 300 people, I miss that. I miss that I don't get to, say something and then hear laughter when I say something funny or, most of the time accidentally because I'm not that clever. But I miss that. I miss having feedback and seeing if people are enjoying what I'm talking about. I kind of just have to assume that you're enjoying and you're benefiting from whatever it is that I'm preaching. And, I miss all that. And I miss the fellowship time that we have. I miss the classes where I get to sit down and open the Word with other Christians and discuss and talk about things. I miss a lot of these things. And, as we are sad about these, think about the situation some people are in. They're missing their jobs. They're missing the financial stability that they had. They may be missing, whatever it is. There's all these different things that really, if we think about it, we mourn. We lament over. We want back the things that we have. There's a lot of different things you want. Not that they're all equal, not that they're all the same, but there's a lot of different things that we mourn. In the context of the Old Testament, when you look at some of the things that they mourn over, well, they mourned over the destruction of Jerusalem. They mourned over the destruction of the temple. They mourned over these things. And so when this verse is talking about blessed are those who mourn, who are missing, who are lamenting, who are grieving the loss of something that is dear to them, whatever that is, it says, blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. You think about that, right? In a time that we're in right now, with this idea of lamenting, the reason I think lamenting is a good thing for us to do is because of this very thing right here. I believe that as we open up to God and talk about all these things that we miss, that we dearly want back, God realizes that. In a lot of ways, He blesses us and comforts us through our process of mourning. Now, for our Old Testament connection, and I already talked about this a little bit, Isaiah 61 again, but this time look at verses 2 and 3. And like I said, it's the context of them mourning the destruction and the loss of Jerusalem, the city. The last thing I want to do is think about what our culture thinks about mourning. It was common in this day and time even that a bereavement period, a mourning period was 7 days or longer. I've talked about that in a couple of different sermons, what that process looked like for them. They had professional wailers and things like that, but their process of mourning was a lot longer time. and you talk to anybody that's lost a family member specifically, you realize that mourning process does not end. It can go on for sometimes years. When certain milestones come back, you're reminded of those things. When you think about what culture says about mourning, though, our culture says, no, get back to business. We want that mourning, right? You have the visitation, the funeral, and then it's done, and then you're back to business. And a lot of times, people are aware that mourning is not that easy. That's why when people get back to work and they get back to dealing with things, you do have those that care and reach out and ask. But it's not a very upheld thing to be somebody that takes forever to mourn, right? In fact, like I say, the thing that's kind of lifted up is somebody that can go right back to going about their business. I think that's why the story of David, when he was mourning the loss of his child, right? He mourned right up until the child was definitely gone, and then he went back to business. I think a lot of our Western culture is we like that because we want to uphold that. We say, yeah, get back to it. Get back out there, be productive, do this. But Jesus is saying, blessed are you when you mourn, when you take the time to realize what you're missing. And why is that? Because God will comfort you. God will remind you. He'll be there to bless you and work with you through that situation. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, these are two different words from verse 3 and 5. Verse 3, like I said, poor has a lot of connotations to it. Meek is not this, poor the way that we talked about the biblical word use of poor, but it's more about your interactions with people, how you treat people. Do you treat people throwing your weight around and, look at my power, look at this, look at that, or are you meek? Are you gentle in the way that you deal with other people? Well, that's what it's saying. Blessed are those who are gentle. Blessed are those who don't treat others with arrogance or oppression, but instead are gentle in their interactions. You go back to Psalm 37:11, and you get your connection here, right? This is, it's like I say, it's almost word for word. This is the value that's upheld within the kingdom. Blessed are you when you're meek. Blessed are you when you're gentle. Think about how our culture looks at that sort of thing, right? Fortunate are those who use their power and advantage, right, to gain more. Blessed are those who, work really hard and are able to have this kind of position. The kind of saying that came to my mind when I was thinking about this is nice guys finish last, right? That's kind of the reality is we don't tend to think, nice people tend to not do as well. And so we don't want to be that nice. We want to, cutthroat in our business and very calculating in our business and things that we handle. But yet here in the kingdom, blessed are those who are meek. And what does it say? For they shall inherit the earth. Now, is that a now or later thing? Well, there's a lot of wrestling that can go on there. But I think each one of these you can kind of see could have their own sermon devoted to it. But let's move on. Verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. You think about this hunger and thirst, right? It's this idea of a strong desire, right? Think about how often you're thirsty. Think about how often you're hungry. It's this strong desire. Now let's think about the word righteousness. Well, righteousness has two pretty clear connotations in Scripture. Now, based on Matthew's use, you can get more specific there. But one of those connotations is justice, is this idea that God is going to bring about righteousness, that all the wrongs are going to be made right. And on one hand, I do think this is talking about this, is that blessed are those who are dying for that day, who they're, thirsty and hungry for that day when God brings about justice in all the world situations. In fact, this was part of what we talked about with the lament psalms. This was a common thing for God's people to say, Lord, bring about your justice, make things right, because we can't stand to see the evil and the inequity and all this stuff that's going on in the world. So that's one aspect of it. But in Matthew's use of the word righteousness, it's more about specific people doing what is right. It's a personalized righteousness. And you see that throughout the Gospel of Matthew. I think both connotations can be true, but I think the follow-up makes more sense for this one, right? Is that blessed are you if you have a strong desire to do what is right. And what does it say? For they shall be satisfied. This Greek word here is actually the word used for fattening animals, right? So this is the idea of stuffed. Right after you've had this big meal, maybe you all got together. We don't know what that's like anymore. It's been so long. But a lot of people get together and you just stuff yourself on food. That's the kind of satisfied it's talking about. Blessed are you when you hunger and thirst for doing what is right, and you're going to be satisfied. And I think this is another one where the now and later gets really complicated, because I think there are aspects of it where we're blessed now, but think about that idea of justice, that grand scheme of justice. Man, the satisfaction that's going to come when the true judge, the honest judge, the one that we know judges rightly, is going to come and judge the world and make everything right. Man, that's a good day to look forward to. Our Old Testament connection for this one is Isaiah 55, verses 1 through 3. And you think about what our culture says about this, right? The culture, it's not about doing what's right. And in fact, we kind of uphold people that can bend the rules and slide, skirt these edges as much as possible to get themselves ahead, to get as far as they can to succeed in life. As long as you're not breaking these rules, as long as you're playing within the rules, then yeah, get ahead. And yet here we see this turned on its head with this beatitude. Blessed are those who hunger for righteousness. Verse 7, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Mercy is not, it's more specific than just forgiving people. It's a willingness to see things from other people's perspectives and also not gloat over other shortcomings. Right? When you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13, what love is, this is mercy, is this idea of seeing things from other people's perspective and helping them through that and being able to forgive wrongs, all these sort of things. Mercy is much more than that. And so what do we see here? Blessed are those that are merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Psalm 25, 6 through 7 is our Old Testament connection. And you're not going to have to go far into the Sermon on the Mount to see this expanded upon, so I'm not going to dive too much more into it. But what does our culture say about this? Well, you got to get even, right? Justice. That's our idea of justice, is getting even. You look back in the Old Testament, it was that eye for an eye idea, is that lex talionis, right? Is we're gonna get even. We're gonna make sure, and really, you look at kind of movies and the things that are glorified in Hollywood, it's even actually going one up. Right? It's making people pay. It's getting one more than what they got from you. That's what our culture upholds. But the reality of the kingdom is, blessed are those who are merciful. How many movies do we see of somebody that's just merciful everywhere they go, and this is held up as some sort of hero? Right? It's not going to be that great of a movie, but that's what this kingdom value is all about. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Pure in heart, not just this external purity, right? You think about how Jesus is going to go time and time again against the Pharisees. Why? Because they had that external purity, and yet they didn't have the internal purity that he's talking about. Blessed are the pure in heart, a truthfulness and an active seeking of God. A lot of these, understanding these words, when you go back to these Old Testament connections, they help to flesh out these little phrases. So pure in heart. What are we going to see about this? Well, if you go back to Psalm 24, 3 through 6, it lays out this idea of truthfulness. Somebody that's truthful in all their interactions. And not only that, it's somebody that has this active seeking of God. Not just, casually if he comes, no, they're actively seeking and pursuing. This is the pure in heart. Someone that's seeking out God and doing it full of truth, actively in their day. What does our culture say about this? Well, it's all about outward appearance, right? Put on that mask, drive that fancy car, buy that big house. What is your appearance? Think about Instagram culture, Facebook culture. We see the best. I'm not advocating that we have to put all our worst moments on these things, but these are all set up to show your best to the world. And it's not always 100% truthful, right? Just because of the lack of interaction. That's all it is. But being people that are truthful, that are fully truthful, that are not trying to put on a front, but instead being open and honest in everything and actively seeking out. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Peace. It's not just the absence of conflict. In fact, I've done a sermon or two on this. Instead, it's a completeness and a wholeness in every area of life, including relationships. It's a completeness and a wholeness in your relationships in every area of your life. And a peacemaker is not just someone that has a passive disposition. It's not someone that just, allows good things to keep going and that absence of conflict mentality. Well, if I step in, that's going to bring about conflict. No, instead, it's someone that's actively attempting to make peace, to make things whole, to make things complete, to bring about resolutions in relationships that have been broken, right? These are the sort of things that a peacemaker does. Our Old Testament connection is Psalm 34:14, bringing about this wholeness, not only in your own life, but in others as well. Blessed are these peacemakers. What did we say about the culture of this, right? The culture is all about getting even, but in fact, we're supposed to go beyond that. Not just in the mercy of showing others mercy, but we're even supposed to help others to show mercy and to receive mercy. We're to be people that are actively going about bringing this mercy in other relationships beyond just ourselves. So blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Now on to verse 10. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, there's not a lot to explain with this one, but what does it say? Right? It's basically that you're wrongly treated because of your faith. If you go about living out this faith that we just read in these verses, and it brings about people treating you with persecution, treating you not fairly, then it says, blessed are you who are persecuted for this righteousness' sake. Our Old Testament connection, you're not going to see one. You're not really going to see a tie there. And that's partly because, this is the aspect that's new, is if you're going to live by these kingdom values that Jesus is saying, look, get prepared for it. This stuff's going to come. He says this multiple times throughout the Gospels. What does our culture say about this? Right? You do you, I'll do me. You got your faith over there. You keep it to yourself. Let's keep it 6 feet apart, right? I'll take care of my faith. You take care of yours. When your faith starts to infringe on mine, then I start to call foul. Then things start to get upset. Now, when I say that, you're probably thinking in terms of the kind of stuff you see in the media. But what did we just read from all of these verses? These are not things that are, you're not going about stirring up strife. You're not standing on street corners with picket signs and all that sort of thing. But no, when you go about and you show mercy, when you go about and you bring about peace, when you hunger and thirst for justice, when you do all these things, let's be honest, some people aren't going to hold those values the same. Just like we went through with each example, the culture doesn't necessarily put these kind of things on a pedestal. So when you start to go out and you do this to the point that it starts to make people mad, right? Maybe you're doing things right is causing others to not be able to get ahead. And that's what makes them mad. They get frustrated that you advocate for something that hinders them in some way, right? All these things that we talked about, these are not ones that are just of a passive person sitting in the corner. These are active things that we are to go out and to do and go out and live in everything that we go through. And when we do, as Jesus says many times throughout the Gospels and in many places, we're going to be persecuted. We're going to face difficult times because living this way is counterculture. If we truly live the way that all these things say, we're going to bump up against people that just do not accept or do not want to live by these kingdom values. Whether we like it or not, if we live these Beatitudes out, we're going to run into persecution. We're going to deal with people who don't exactly see eye to eye. So the Sermon on the Mount starts with this explaining of kingdom values. It explains what it means to be blessed in the kingdom, what it means to be a truly happy, fortunate, uplifted, look at this person, emulate what they're doing. These Beatitudes lay out what this means for the kingdom. It should show us that if we are living as a disciple, we are called to a different standard. Hopefully we all look at these and help us to realize that, man, maybe we should be doing a few things differently. Maybe we should be more active in our faith. Maybe we should be more active in pursuing peace or showing mercy, right? These are things that we all can be challenged by. But I think it's important as we begin discussions of evangelism to understand this is what we're calling people to. We ended with this idea of you're going to face persecution. You're going to bump up against people that don't hold the same values. But ultimately, living this way, we're not living this way to overtake them. We're living this way to convince them to do the same, to bring them along with us, to be that one beggar showing another beggar where to find bread. As we go through this Sermon on the Mount, I pray that you're challenged by these things. I pray that if you're a Christian, that these things cause you to reflect and hopefully do some confessing and some praying, and maybe even some challenging yourself, saying, hey, I want to be more like this. I want to live these values, live these commands more specifically in my life. Or if you're not a Christian, I pray as you wrestle with this, you see that really this is the better way to live. This is what we were created for. This is what we were meant for, to live lives full of mercy, full of justice, full of making peace, full of these values. And these are the things that we should start to uphold in the world. Not the people that try to get ahead, not the people that try to one up or get even or all these things that we talked about, but instead we should be people that hold up these values. And these values, hey, let's realize our world is strongly affected by these, right? These came from Christ. This is what it means to be a follower of Christ. It's great if we do all this in our culture, but we need to give credit and glory to where it's due, and that's to Jesus Christ. So if you're not a Christian and you go through this and you say, hey, I need to be, we'd love for you to do that. Reach out to us at Alvaton, and we'd love to help you through that process. I pray that you wrestle with these. I pray that you take care of yourself. As always, we look forward to when we're able to get back together, and pray that you just grow closer to God and grow in your faith through this circumstance and this situation. May the Lord bless you.